thanks for staying with us. All contact sports in schools in South Africa were suspended because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But now the Department of Basic Education has given schools the green light to resume contact sports. This comes after some primary schools resumed classes on a full-time basis. Now schools will be able to start with contact and non-contact sports, including training and inter-school matches, as well as arts and cultural activities, but without spectators. I'm joined now by sports psychologist Dr. Kirsten van Heerden to unpack the implications of these various decisions. She joins us live from Durban. Dr. van Heerden, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, we just spent the first half of this bulletin speaking to a reporter in Cape Town who had attended the Springbok test against the British and Irish Lions. You just have to look at a game like that to again realise how important sports is to our country's psyche. What so then those families and those kids who on a Saturday morning, if they're privileged enough to do so, are out there giving it their all for their teams, for their schools, in front of their loved ones. It really has created a big gap not having those sports being able to be played by families. What is some of the impact that you have noticed of sports not being given the go-ahead for such a long period of time?
No, first of all, thank you for asking me to be on the show tonight. And as you say, it's so much part of our identity and our cultural identity. And for children, I think the impact is huge. You know, sport is a place where they find belonging, they find identity, they find achievement. And, you know, not to have that has been incredibly difficult. And I know a number of the young athletes that I work with, you know, they've had goals that they're working towards. And as much as sport, yes, it's entertainment, it's fun, but they're real goals that these young athletes have had. And I think our heart goes out to all of them, especially those that are in matric and towards the end of their schooling career, but now no longer have the opportunity to achieve certain things. So,
yeah, because
they can just be.
I suppose if you look at the kids who, from the start of high school, there are schools where getting full colours or playing in the first team by the time they get to matric is a pretty big deal. And then the rug being pulled out from under you, like so much was pulled out from under us when the pandemic arrived, it must be a massive a shock to the system, as it were. Break it down for us. What are some of the issues that some of these young athletes have been speaking to you about? What are the feelings and the emotions that they've been going through in dealing with not having their sports as an outlet?
Yeah, as you say, it is an outlet very often. And so a lot of the feelings of these young athletes that I work with, it is obviously frustration that they can't do the thing that they absolutely love to do, like most of us. As I say, just a sense of loss, really. And, you know, because this is something that they've been working towards. And I think, as much as I said as well, it's just fun. We can never underestimate that the power of just having some fun, you know, on the field. And so, yeah, the continued uncertainty as well is probably the most common theme that I'm hearing amongst athletes. Are we going to be allowed back? Are we not? What's going to happen? And that's incredibly difficult for them to deal with.
Now, we spoke a bit about your older athletes, those who perhaps have their eyes set on an elite career at some point, on the more serious side of things. Let's talk about younger kids. Parents might be watching right now, and they've got kids at primary school level who perhaps, I mean, we're looking at visuals of kids going through drills, learning rugby, as it were. The social side is probably more important when it comes to younger children and the psychology of sports. What advice do you have for parents who perhaps didn't realize what a big impact not being able to play sports has had, and not being able to socialize with their teammates, and especially our team sports, has had on the lives of their especially younger children?
Mm-hmm. You know, as you say, it really is. Sport is this microcosm of life, and it's a great place for children to learn all of these various different elements like teamwork and commitment and dedication. And they say the social aspect is huge. And so my advice to any parent would simply be to communicate with your child and ask them about how they're feeling. And so certainly I think some children are probably feeling a little bit anxious about going back. You know, some clearly are very happy to go back. So the more that you can really just talk to your children and hear what they've got to say and understand their feelings. And I would say to parents really to encourage your children to go back if some of them are maybe a little bit nervous, because it's, as I said, there is the incredible lessons that you can learn from the sport.
Now, as an adult and amongst our peers, we're talking about how this last year and a half has made us almost weary of group activities, even some would say of personal touch, as it were, and now we're speaking about contact sports going back. Is that something that needs to be addressed as well, that some kids might be a little weary or unused to being in groups right now after so many months of isolation, of perhaps being touched, even if it's a contact sport and that kind of thing? How should we be aware of that, and how can teachers and caregivers address those kinds of fears, as it were, of children who are preparing to go back on the sports field?
Definitely. I mean, again, I think, as you say, as adults, we sometimes find it strange to be in places where there are lots of people, or, you know, without masks, or, you know, and we kind of like, goodness, or someone standing a little bit too close to you in the queue in the shop, and you get a little bit worried about things. So, of course, children are going to be feeling like this. You know, they pick up on adults' feelings as well. So again, as I said earlier, really the best advice that I have is just talk to your children, you know, and not just to be positive and just to go out there, but really to try and understand what their anxiety might be, and then to help them through that. You know, children are not always able to have the language, let's say. They don't have the language to describe how they're feeling. But if those of us that are adults can say, hey, maybe you are feeling nervous, maybe you are feeling a little bit worried about this, you know, this is how you can go about handling it. It really is to say, just talk.
Yeah. I suppose that is good advice for all of us right now. Dr. Van Heerden, before I let you go, I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball, because I do remember that you are an elite athlete yourself in the swimming circles, as it were, and we're just seeing the end of the Olympics right now. Tomorrow, I think, is the end with the men's marathon taking place. Lots of talk around the South African performance there. And obviously, as South Africans, we always expect our teams to perform above and beyond what really should be possible. If you look at the resources, it's so many of our athletes are unable to access to perform at that level. And this time around, because of COVID, because of all kinds of reasons, and lack of resources being another thing, a bit of a disappointing performance when it comes to the number of medals. I didn't tell you beforehand I was going to talk to you about this, but I thought you'd be able to talk from your own personal experience. Any advice for some of those athletes that are coming back that perhaps didn't perform to the best of their abilities, or didn't go the way that they wanted? I think of our 100-meter relay team, where one of the athletes flew all the way to Japan just to take part and never even got to run because the team dropped the baton right at the first handover. What would your advice be to an athlete coming back who now has to deal with feelings of disappointment and yet have to pick themselves up and go back to training to train for potentially the next big event?
No, absolutely. And I don't mind asking at all. I can talk a long time on the subject. And I think, you know, really, the Olympic Games, it's been incredibly unique and special this time, and just very different. And, you know, my advice to any athlete, and certainly the athletes that I work with that are there, is to really just embrace the fact that there has been this very strange, very bizarre kind of Olympic Games. And, you know, you can, even if you are disappointed, you can come back and you can say that I was part of the Tokyo Olympic Games in the middle of a global pandemic. Yeah. And honestly as well, you know, and I know it's tough for athletes, but no athlete goes out there to try and perform badly. And as you say, as much as we might be disappointed in our medal count, first of all, it's wonderful to see female athletes doing so well. You know, Tatiana and Bianca, you know, winning medals, which is really fantastic. And also, you know, we've actually done well in terms of getting like 3 South Africans into the semifinals of the 100-meter for men. You know, that's never happened before. So, you know, and it's going back to children as well. I think when we only speak about the outcome, only speak about the medals, only speak about winning, we kind of really lose what actually has gone on at the Olympics, and the process and the value of a lot of the performances. When you hear lots of athletes speaking, and they gave it their best. And for the disappointment, you know, of course you can feel disappointed. It's a normal part of things, you know, when you've worked really hard for something. But I think in amongst the chaos of what's been happening in the past sort of 18 months in the world, just to get there is incredible. And as I said, they are those special few that can say that they were there.
Absolutely, the best kind of advice indeed. That's sports psychologist Dr. Kirsten Van Heerden joining us live there from Durban. Thank you so much. Some great advice for all of us, not just those taking part in sports, as it will, although we probably all should be getting a little bit more active as we head to the end of winter.